I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you've had an incredible stroke of luck. You've tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families. And we have another pre-recorded episode here, although, again, we're going to meet the highest standards of For a Green Future excellence, so no need to fear there. And I know this show initially airs on 100.7 The Ticket, and which is a sports station, an ESPN station. And you folks, you sports folks, are going to want to stick around for this episode because this is a rare sports-related episode of For a Green Future. We have an excellent interview coming up for you in about 15 minutes. That we are interviewing the Philadelphia Eagles stadium manager, because it turns out that the Philadelphia Eagles have the greenest stadium in the NFL, and that is that they have, they've really done a whole bunch of stuff to make the stadium more sustainable, and as you'll hear, it doesn't hurt the fan experience at all. In fact, it helps the fan experience, and there's one actual sports-related question embedded in this interview. So, if you're into sports, this is the episode for you For a Green Future. And if you're not into sports, or if you're just a human being, this is another excellent discussion about ecology and the environment. So we're just going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so. Then we'll have our interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. Then we'll hear from our fantastic and wonderful sponsors and advertisers. Then it's on to hear from Rebecca Wood, our co-host, and she has an interesting little report for us on Eagles in honor of the Eagles Stadium interview that we were doing. Then it's ecological news, and that's it. That's our show. So just a few things to talk with you folks about before we get to our interview. One is that I was out walking my dog this morning, walking Ursula, and it was she got me up at 6 a.m., which at the time I kind of resented. I usually don't like to get up till 7:30, but if a dog's saying it's kind of urgent, you have to pay attention. I've learned that the hard way. So anyway, we went for a walk, and there was thunder and lightning. The sun was not yet up, and yet there was you could tell there was a huge thunderstorm coming, and we literally there was more and more lightning, and as we were heading for home, some of the raindrops started falling, and we literally, was like run into the house, slam the door, and boom, the downpour started. And thunderstorms have happened in October. That's not terribly unusual, but this kind of it was like a summer thunderstorm. It was like, and I'm looking at the weather forecast here, looking ahead to all the way to the end of October, and there is no frost in sight here in October. And frost, essential part of our ecosystem. All the plants and animals that live in our ecosystem in this part of the world evolved with frost coming. And if we don't get frost, then other critters are going to start moving up from the south, and some of them are not so nice. But it's just another reminder, a warm thunderstorm towards the end of October here. Just another reminder that this whole global warming thing is happening. We've got the positive feedback loop. And I listened on C-SPAN, I was listening to President Biden's, he gave a speech in Scranton, Pennsylvania yesterday. That was Wednesday the 20th. And a good part of this speech was talking about the environment and saving the planet and dealing with global warming. And all of that's exactly right. And he talked about how during the Obama administration, they set in place policies that helped bring down the price of wind and solar power to what they are today, which is the cheapest forms of electrical generation, cheaper than coal, cheaper than natural gas. And this is true that their policies did that, but unfortunately, the whole picture that they had what was called an all-of-the-above energy policy, which means that they didn't just support wind and solar, although that's the part they want you to pay attention to. They also supported fracking. They also supported nuclear. And so they set up this situation where, we've got wind and solar, but the original push for this, the place where wind power particularly became viable, became economically viable technology, was actually Denmark, because the U.S. had been a leader in wind way back in the 1970s. Then we kind of gave up on it around in 1980 with a particular president who didn't much care for wind, which was Ronald Reagan. And then it sort of stalled until the Danish, the people from Denmark, picked it up and created the first commercially viable wind turbine, which is a 660 kilowatt turbine, a little over half a megawatt, which at the time was shocking. No one could believe that they had figured out how to make windmill blades that long, or they could generate power that well. And that was developed by the company Vestas, which is still the world leader in wind technology. But the U.S. has been playing catch up ever since, and we're just about to the point where we are caught up, because GE came out with a 14 megawatt turbine last year, which after that Vestas came out with a 15 and China came out with a 16. But the all of the above strategy actually was not a strategy. If you're trying to promote all of the above energy sources, that's not a plan, that's a lack of a plan. And that's what's brought us to the point today where in this Build Back Better plan that Biden's got, we should be, as Dr. Mark Jacobson has said on this show, we should be focused like a laser on wind and solar and storage. And if we put all our efforts in those areas, we can get off carbon, and we can head off the worst of the global warming that's coming. But instead, what we have are, the nuclear industry lined up for $35 billion in just direct handouts. Just here, give us $35 billion. And we're wasting time and energy on carbon capture and sequestration. And carbon capture and sequestration is literally a pipe dream. They literally want to pipe carbon back into the ground, which is a technology that uses energy. So you've got to spend more energy, probably generate more carbon to try to capture some carbon. And you might say, it's a net, you gain. But our machines cannot capture carbon as well as plant life, as well as algae, and as well as trees and prairies. And so the carbon capture technology has already been created by nature. So if we stop putting carbon in the air, nature will take care of that. And so I think part of the problem the Biden administration is having pushing this Build Back Better plan through is this idea that you can't choose between these technologies, that you pick them all and somehow the best one's going to come out on top. Well, the best ones have come out on top. Wind and solar have turned out to be cheaper and more practical and better literally in every way than nuclear or a fracked natural gas. But we're stuck with the it's like having a poison pill. You know, the wind and the sun, those are what we actually need and what we actually want. Overwhelming majority of Americans, and poll after poll, say they want wind and solar energy developed, but then they wrap nuclear and they wrap fracking in that blanket, and now the whole package is no longer quite so palatable, and it's harder to get enthusiastic about a plan that's going to be creating nuclear wastes that we're going to have to deal with for 250,000 years. So I know politics is supposed to be the art of compromise, but there are times in life and there are situations where compromise is deadly, where you literally cannot compromise. And if you do compromise, you fail miserably. And I'm afraid that's what we're seeing here, is that this plan, which is full of compromises and give backs and concessions, people aren't getting behind it, in part because it's not really what we want or need. What we want is an economy based on wind and sun, and the wind and sun are there, and those energy sources are waiting for us. And other countries in the world, notably countries like Germany and New Zealand, are making the switch. They have a policy. They have made decisions. They have said these energy sources are better than those energy sources, and we're going to encourage those, the good ones, and discourage the bad ones. And it's working for them. And so we used to be a country that could do that. We used to be a country that could make decisions. Now, some of those decisions were bad. I mean, back in the 50s, when Eisenhower created the Atoms for Peace program, it looked like a good idea at the time, but it turned out to be a bad idea long term for life on Earth. And so once we realized that, we needed to make another decision. We needed to change and switch back away from nuclear power. But by then, there was a nuclear lobby created. After you pour billions of government dollars into an industry, you create thousands upon thousands of lobbyists that want you to keep pouring more in to keep their industry going, even if it's an industry that should shut down, like the coal industry, which is an industry which now should shut down. If you just kind of go along with all of the above and just say, oh, we'll have a little of this and a little of that, what you end up with is what we have today, which is that continuing to put more carbon into air. The technologies have arrived, wind and sun have arrived, but they're not being applied on the scale that they need to be in order for us to save society. So we're kind of drifting a central, this idea of centralness being in the middle. We're trying to, the middle is kind of drifting towards disaster. And that's where we're at right now. And it's not a good place. It's not an acceptable place. So I think if Biden were to come out and say, look, we're going to support wind, we're going to support sun, we've dumped the nuclear subsidies, we're not going to give it, we're going to try to get off of natural gas. If he does that, he's a lot more believable than when he's saying, we've got to do this for future generations. We've got to save the planet. And I agree. and ecologists agree and environmentalists agree. But we don't agree with having those poison pills in there, with having the technologies which are actually hurting us continue to be supported. So he should take a lesson from the Obama administration, because the fact that the Obama administration pushed fracking, and in fact one of Hillary Clinton's jobs as Secretary of State was to export U.S. fracking technology all over the world. And so the U.S. became sort of the fracking headquarters of the planet. And so billions upon billions of tons of carbon that are in the atmosphere now are Obama's responsibility and Hillary Clinton's responsibility. And that's one reason people couldn't get behind Hillary Clinton in 2016, is because she had this horrible record of promoting natural gas, which everyone knows has put, as I said, billions upon billions of tons of CO2 in the atmosphere all over the planet. And so that's where you lose enthusiasm. That's where you lose support. And that's where you just kind of muddle along and sort of get some things halfway done and other things partway done. But none of it is enough to actually save us. And what we need is saving. And so if Biden were able to get up there and say unequivocally, here's our energy plan. We are going to promote wind. We're going to promote sun. We're going to dump nukes. We're going to dump coal. We're going to dump natural gas. If he just says that, then he becomes a leader, and people can follow. Some people will oppose, but a clear leader will get more done than somebody who just sort of middles along trying to please every group of lobbyists that there are, give a little something to everybody. In this case, we cannot afford to give a little something to everybody. We can't afford to give more concessions to the fracking industry, more concessions to coal. They've got to go. There's just no arguing with that. So that's just some thoughts in the morning. And now let's hear from the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's start with your name and title.
Norman Vosschulte, and that's spelled V-O-S-S-S, 3 S's, C-H-U-L-T-E, and I'm the Director of Fan Experience.
Okay, great. So, Lincoln Financial Field, where the Eagles play, is widely considered to be the greenest stadium in the NFL. So, before we dive into exactly what that means, could you give us a little history? Where did the push to go green come from?
Yeah, the team's commitment, in all honesty, to sustainability starts with our Eagles chairman and CEO, Jeffrey Lurie. He's a real progressive leader and has always had a vision to, for us to become a good citizen and do our part to be a forward-thinking organization and have an approach that always asks the question of what can we do in order to innovate and be sustainable in our organization. And when we moved into our stadium in 2003, that question was asked by our ownership and by Jeffrey to not only run a stadium and win Super Bowls, but also to be a global good citizen on the sustainability front.
Okay. So Go Green goes way beyond just like buying carbon credits. It's kind of breathtaking the number of different ways the organization is attacking this project. Could you give us an overview of what's included in the Go Green program?
Yeah, absolutely. We, as you just mentioned, it's a pretty all-encompassing program, but we've kind of kicked that sustainable tire down the road for many years now, since 2003. It all started with a blue bin under everyone's desk, some of that low-hanging fruit that anyone could participate in, and recycling paper. And then it kind of led to us now, boasting one of the largest solar power plants of any stadium in the world. We produce our own green energy and also purchase solar and wind RECs. We obviously recycle and compost. 99% of our stadium is landfill free, and it really is 99.9%. We always look at our energy conservation and efficiency. I can get into a little bit more details there, but really looking at how can we conserve the most energy possible. Reforestation. We're one of the only teams in the world that offsets player travel through planting seagrass in the ocean, and also have planted hundreds of trees, and with our corporate partners, thousands of trees to offset carbon emissions for player travel. And also, we look at green product purchasing. Post-consumer recycled materials, environmentally friendly products. We have formed partnerships with sustainable brands such as Braskem and Torque, and we always, with our partners, look at new and innovative ways of finding the next cool, sustainable project. I'll give you a quick glimpse into one of them. For example, taking all the bottle caps that we gather when we sell all of the products in the building, and taking those bottle caps as well as old stadium seats, melting them down into pellets that then are recycled into and produced into cups, benches that we use at playgrounds that we build in the local area, and such things. So it's real cool and exciting things that we do.
Wow. Okay, what's the capacity of the stadium solar panels?
Well, we have close to 11,000 solar panels. We produce about 40 megawatt of our own energy, 4 megawatt of our own energy. And so we use about 10 megawatts a year, and 40% of that is produced by us on our solar power plant on any really a rotational basis. We don't store the energy on site. We sell it back to the NRG, who operates and maintains the solar power plant, and then we buy solar and wind racks at a reduced rate back, and that's how we operate the stadium.
Okay, cool. Now, the 99.9% plus of your waste that does not go into landfills, does this cause any kind of inconvenience for the fans? Do they have to do anything different to keep everything out of the dump?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially when you come to an Eagles game and you consume alcoholic beverages. And if the team is not doing as well as we want it to do any given Sunday, you don't want to inconvenience the fan as much as you want to obviously educate your fans and want them to partake in your sustainability mission. You also know that they come here to be entertained by football or other collegiate sporting events, for example, or musical acts, right? And so we really don't inconvenience fans. We have a trash sorting team on game days that consists of about 50 to 60 trash sorters who back up the house, literally rip open every trash bag and sort all the trash out. We have one trash can in the stadium about every 20 feet or so that you can throw literally anything in the trash can. We do have plastic waste receptacle containers where there's a little opening that fits a plastic bottle. So those are big, and they're in the form of a plastic bottle, so it's pretty self-explanatory for fans to throw anything in there. So we can sort that out. But other than that, we really don't ask the fan to sort, but rather do it back of house. Just because what we've noticed is there's quite a bit of contamination when you ask fans to sort. And so we do it all back of house.
All right, so overall, has this program cost the team money, or do the savings on like the electricity make up for the cost of the program?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Folks always ask about what's the return on investment, right, for your sustainability missions. Well, the return on investment is a greener planet for future generations. But on the other hand, I think your question is also good, and partly because you, as a football team or really any standing organization, can't just go out and build your own solar power plant and maybe bankrupt the organization that way, right? You have to take this in strides. And when you do a program like this and you start with the low-hanging fruit, what you discover very quickly is that there's some really cool things you can do to actually make some of your money back. And I'll give you one example. We learned very quickly when you send out commingled trash to a with your waste hauler to a recycling plant, you'll get about $75 a ton for your aluminum. Aluminum is quite expensive in the industry these days, and so we asked, well, can we get more money if we sorted out our aluminum and then sent only the aluminum out? And they said, well, if you bale it, we can actually sell it between $800 to $1,200 a ton. And so that's quite a difference, $75 a ton compared to $800 to $1,200 a ton.
Wow.
Does it completely offset your sustainability program? It doesn't. Also, if we wouldn't have a partner like NRG to own and operate a solar power plant, most likely we wouldn't be in a position, not just because of money, but also because of expertise of building and running our own solar power plant. Partners. It's just so important to have partners who understand and work in that area of profession, because we don't. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to have the right partnerships, like I said, and you have to be a little bit smart, because when you do kick that tire down the road, like I said earlier, you learn things, right? So we don't necessarily sit here and take inventory of every cent that's spent on our sustainability program, because it's just part of our DNA and it's part of what we do. And some of the things like offsetting our carbon emissions from player travel, we understand and our owner believes it's just the right thing to do. For that, it's not a question of, well, is there a return on investment as you make this investment? Like I said earlier, the return on investment for us is to be a good citizen as well as making this planet greener for future generations, which we believe is just the right thing to do. But as philosophical as that sounds, as I said earlier, you also learn things as you go along, and you don't necessarily have to bankrupt a team if you do it smart.
So the plantings, I understand the team has a quote-unquote forest that you've planted as part of your carbon offsets. How big is the forest? Are there any actual eagles in your forest?
That's a great question. So, for many years, we actually offset our player travel with the Conservation Fund, the PA Department, Conservation and Natural Resources, and we created about a 6.5-acre Eagles Forest in Salem, Pennsylvania. We participated yearly in tree plantings and to offset our team travel, right? This past year, we've shifted our efforts to become the first pro sports team to partner with the Ocean Foundation and the Ocean Conservancy to offset all team travel from the 2020 season and further seasons going in the future through seagrass and mangrove restoration efforts in Puerto Rico. And so far, approximately 4 acres of seagrass has been planted in Jobos Bay. So are eagles perching? Well, if there are eagles in Pennsylvania, which there are, I'm sure maybe is the answer there. But, more interestingly, maybe now there's a certain type of fish that has another habitat in the ocean again. And when you do some, pun intended here, dive deep into conservancy, you realize that it is very important, obviously, to plant trees, but it is more even important to look at our oceans. And we've learned that if you don't start at the ocean and you don't restore some of the seagrass that's lost over the next generations, there's going to be so much blue carbon not being offset that it could get really dangerous for life on Earth. And one of the first investments in the sustainability sector has to be in the ocean, because if the ocean dies, the world dies. And so even though we're fairly close to an ocean, we're not adjacent to an ocean, we realize that as a sports team, with everything I've told you earlier, with what we believe is our obligation to do something for the environment, we realize that planting seagrass may be the next step in offsetting, carbon emissions from player team travel, and may have a bigger impact even than planting trees. Now, we don't stop planting trees. We actually do still plant trees with some of our partnerships. They call it the Eagles field goal forest. Whenever a field goal is kicked, trees are planted. So we used to have a partner that did that, and currently we're working with another partner on starting that up again. So we're kind of doing both at the moment.
What is done with the compost from the food?
Compost is a really tricky thing. A decade ago or so, everyone believed, well, you need to figure out how to have all your trash be compostable. The only problem is if you don't have a composting facility near you, then you're going to be asking a waste hauler to perhaps haul your waste quite far. And then you have to look again at the carbon emissions of the waste hauler, right? And so, unfortunately, we don't have any composting facilities nearby. There used to be one. It was shut down by the government just because there was too much contamination. And so we do have a composting facility up in the Poconos. It's called 2 Particular Acres. However, they're very particular, just as the title says, in what they accept. So we send our pre-consumer food waste. Very specifically, what we're allowed to send, we send up there. But we don't stop there. So the next step was, well, if we don't have a large composting facility, what's the next step we can do? Well, we looked into biodigesters. So now we have installed biodigesters. We tried them out in our training facility. They worked so well. Now we have them installed in our stadium. and some of the food waste goes into the biodigesters. That has eliminated another portion of our waste. Then we work with, like I told you earlier, the aluminum and all the packaging and things like that. Where can that be sent? So, for example, the shrink wrap that comes into our stadium and all the plastic bags are now being gathered, and they're being recycled, turned into pellets that's going into drywall. That in the future will be used to build rooms in the stadium, right? If, then it leaves some of the other trash, some of the building materials. How can we recycle those? So we work with other organizations. And then some of the trash that can't be recycled, can't be sent to a composting facility, goes to energy from waste, which breaks it down, burns it, and then captures all the gases and breaks the gases further down into usable gases that then can be reused and recycled into other forms of consumer products or into other forms of gases that are being used in industry. And so we really try to stay away from sending anything to a landfill. And we work with partners again there. Aramark is one of our great partners here in the concessionaire in the building. And, when we first opened the building, we actually ripped open a trash bag and looked at all the stuff that was in the trash bag and said, okay, well, what in here is not recyclable, and can you get us products that are? And so Aramark actually has a pretty robust sustainability program themselves, went back and looked at their purchasing habits and some of the things they provide us, and has committed to providing us with compostable or recyclable material.
Okay.
And when you don't have a composting facility near you, that's when you have to get a little bit more innovative, and that's why innovation is so important to us, and that's why it's part of our motto. And that's where a company like Braskem comes in, who says, hey, by the way, we can do the shrink wrap, and we can do the taking all the plastic and making new benches out of it and things like that.
All right. So what's the community's attitude towards the Go Green?
The question always comes up, how are you educating your fans? So once again, our fans come to enjoy sports and entertainment. But as we deliver this messaging of the Go Green campaign, if you will, or because it actually fits really well with our colors, obviously, our fans really take to it. They love it. We have sort of taken a more fun and lighthearted approach to educating our fans on our sustainability efforts. I'll give you an example. In the urinals, there's a big sign that says, recycle your beer here, but your trash outside. That is one of the, kick back your thermostat, and it shows a picture of the kicker, kick back your thermostat 2 degrees. By that, you can save $2,000 and save the planet. So things like that, show our fans that, hey, we're committed to this, but so can you. And we're actually currently working on a new marketing campaign on how can we inspire our fans to partake in our sustainability efforts. We've gotten nothing but great feedback when school classes or people come through here on tours. They're really inspired not only by a great building, an incredible field, and what the team has accomplished, but then when they hear about our sustainability missions, they feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy and say, hey, this is really cool. You guys are not just into football. You're also doing something cool for the planet. It's really awesome, and that's what we're all about.
So what's in the future for Go Green?
Yeah, like I said earlier, we always like to kick that tire down the road and ask ourselves what's next, right? And I tell you what, there's some really cool things coming. We have partnered with a company that produces hydrogen fuel. We are in the process of working with the city of Philadelphia and obtaining a permit to install a hydrogen fueling station at Lincoln Financial Field. We're working with another company that it's an alternative fuel solution, so we're looking into alternative fuels. We're also looking into furthering our aluminum. Can we have our aluminum be some part of a circular economy where maybe it's not sent out and just recycled? Can it be turned into new aluminum, or can it be turned into something else that can be reused at the stadium? So we're working with a company there to look into that. So there's some really cool things that we're exploring at the moment. We're always asking ourselves this question, right? What's next? And what else can we do? And it's exciting because I think what we've learned is that everyone in the organization kind of has to be part of this in order for us to find new things. And so, whether it comes out of the operations department or sometimes out of the corporate partnerships department, as in, some of those fuels now, or, we learn new things because as we talk to some of the industries out there, like I said earlier, Braskem, it's pretty amazing what can be done if you just ask those questions. And we've learned to ask those questions, and so those are some of the things on the docket, but I can't wait to see what the future holds.
So Eagles are third in the NFC East right now. What are their chances this year?
I tell you what, so never count out an Eagles fan. Never. We all saw what happened when they said we were the underdogs, right? Our fans are amazing. In fact, I think they're going to take over the Raiders Stadium this Sunday. You'll see more green and hear more cheering for the Eagles in there. Never ever count us out. It's one of those teams, that you just, I remember when we went in the Super Bowl, all these people, saying, "Oh, the Eagles are not going to do it. It's not going to happen." Lane Johnson, these guys putting on the underdog masks, right? And boom, it happened. So I would do a disservice to our team if I would say anything else than don't count us out. Don't ever underestimate an Eagles fan because they're loud and strong and awesome.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our interview. Now, usually, regular listeners to the show know that we talk about big, important issues, and we interview activists and people on the front line and scientists. And I just wanted to do a show where we talked about something kind of fun, because I over and over again, I want to make the point on For a Green Future that the green future is not a future of privation. It's not a future where you have to be freezing in the dark and eating nothing but canned food by candlelight. No, the green future is just as fun. Actually, it's more fun than the not green present. And you can still have football games. You can still fill stadiums with people. You can still do all the fun stuff we do now. It's just we'll be doing it sustainably in a way that doesn't destroy the planet. And kudos to the Philadelphia Eagles for blazing the trail there in that direction. All right, and speaking of trails, it's time to talk about our sponsors. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, wcparks.org. You can also download their cool app at any app store. You search for WC Parks. And of course, they're a huge presence on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. That's the Wood County Park District. For a Green Future is also brought to you by our wonderful, wonderful patrons, people who have gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon. They searched for a Green Future, up popped our little page with all our different levels of membership. They picked the level of membership that matched their budget. And every month, a painless little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and keeps the show running. I also want to thank, there are some people who mail in donations, patrons who just, we just had a very generous one get mailed this past week. And I want to thank those people, too, the ones who don't trust newfangled things like the internet. And those, if you're interested in sending us a donation, you can send a donation to P.O. Box 969, Bowling Green, Ohio, 43402. That's For a Green Future at P.O. Box 969, Bowling Green, Ohio, 43402. Thanks so much to our advertisers and our patrons. All right, moving on. It's time to hear from our co-host, Rebecca Wood, and she's been looking over the border there to Pennsylvania. Okay, Rebecca, how are you doing?
All right, how are you?
Good. So what do you have for us this week?
Okay, well, you said something about you're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep.
And so I thought it might be cool to look at the things you can do around somewhere around anywhere Philadelphia. And I ran across a thing. There's this grandiose claim in the, Department of Natural Resources of Pennsylvania or something, that they have the best fall color in the country, and in fact, in the world.
Ooh.
I'm not sure who's tested this exactly, or whether, there's been a court challenge or anything. But apparently, a place where you can go and see this is something called the Laurel Highlands region of southwest Pennsylvania. So this is actually southeast of Pittsburgh, actually. But you could conceivably, hit it on your way or to or from a game, if you're coming from the right part of the world, or if you're in trouble for watching too much football and your family's annoyed with you, you could take them here.
Right.
Kind of combine, multicast a little, It contains Mount Davis, which is the highest point in the state of Pennsylvania. In the Laurel Highlands, you can do camping, hiking, hunting, mountain biking, whitewater kayaking, trout fishing, wildlife viewing, and both cross-country and downhill skiing and golf. So kind of anything that you can imagine doing in a wooded, natural, mountainous type area, you can do there.
Wow, yeah, that's a full day right there.
There you go. Yeah. Maybe not all at once, but yeah, it's nice up there because of it's got the Allegheny Mountains in it, a large portion thereof, which is I think we've talked about it before, part of the Appalachian Range, and it runs from northeast to southwest for 400 miles through Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. One of the major parts of the park, or the Laurel Highlands area, is something called Laurel Hill, which is a mountain which contains in it 6 state parks. Laurel Ridge, Laurel Mountain, Lynn Run, Cooser, Laurel Hill, and something called Ohio Pile, which I looked at because it sounds like it has something to do with Ohio, but it's some native language that they don't specify. Means it comes from the word ahi o piliele, which means turns very white. So I don't know if they mean the spring when there's flowers, or in the winter when there's snow, or both, but at some point in history, it had a tendency to turn very white for a while.
Huh.
And the Laurel Highlands hiking trail runs the entire length of the ridge of Laurel Hill, which is 70 miles, presumably through several state parks. Laurel Hill also contains 2 state forests, the Gallatin and Forbes state forests, and has 2 notable gorges. The Kanama and the, oh my goodness, this one's difficult, Yugiogany gorges. Also in the Laurel Highlands, there's something called Chestnut Ridge, which is the westernmost ridge of the Allegheny Mountains. So it's kind of the terminus, so that's kind of a big deal. Also, if you want to do something cultural while you're around, if you go to Stewart Township in that whole area, it apparently has 2, not 1, but 2 Frank Lloyd Wright houses. There's Falling Water and Kentucky Knob. So if someone is getting tired of being outside, you can take them indoors for a minute.
Right.
Also, there's a lot of old-fashioned resorts up there, mountain resorts, which sound nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Falling Water, that's the house that actually has a stream flowing through the middle of it.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Which is a cool idea.
Yeah. There's a few amusement parks, I think. There's a lot of stuff up there. Some historic towns that are nice, that kind of thing. There's kind of something for everybody almost.
Pennsylvania sure is, wooded. When you fly over it or drive through it, there's tons of forest and stuff. And all right, well, thanks very much for that peek at the Laurel. What is the Laurel Highlands? Was the name of it?
Yeah, the Laurel Highlands. That's the name of the whole region, I guess.
Okay.
It may be closer to Pittsburgh than Philadelphia, but I'm sure it's not that far away.
All right. Well, it sounds like Koga's urging people to go also. So.
All right.
All right.
Nice.
Well, thanks a lot. So I just wanted to start the news segment, since we've come to the portion of the show where we talk about ecological news, with a bit of a inaccurate story, with a story which is getting some play now. And the wind turbine industry has been facing a lot of disinformation. I mean, the most famous, of course, was President Trump saying that wind turbines cause cancer, for which he had no proof at all, because there is no such proof. But there have been a lot of other little stories, and one of the main ways that they're trying to prevent wind power from really taking off is to attack it on environmental issues. And so for a couple years, there were a whole bunch of stories about how terrible used wind turbine blades are, since they had to be pretty much tossed in the dump. And now in a dump, the probably the most benign thing you could put in there is a wind turbine blade, since it doesn't have any toxic chemicals in it. It's basically like fiberglass mostly. And so it wasn't a big deal, but in response to the criticism, the wind turbine industry has now developed methods of recycling the materials in wind turbine blades, which is great. And so the anti-wind turbine people are pivoting, and there are stories appearing in the news about local fishermen along the East Coast are afraid that offshore wind development is going to drive them out of business. And that this is not true. They express fears that they're going to crash into the wind turbines. No, the wind turbines are a nautical mile apart. And so, you should be able to navigate around turbines that are spaced out over a mile apart each. But the main thing to look at, these news stories are talking about the fears of the local fishermen about what might happen. This response should be to go look over in Europe, where they have tons of offshore wind, and see what the experience of fishermen actually are. And what they're discovering over there is that the wind turbine bases act like artificial reefs. And each wind turbine becomes a little oasis surrounded by fish, by thousands and thousands of fish. And so the presence of the wind turbine actually increases the yield, increases the catch, the haul for local fishermen. And, they don't have fishermen wind turbine collisions because, they're clearly marked on the charts, and they're big, they're easy to see, and they're actually good for the fishing industry. So this is just another scare tactic, but I did want to talk about it on the show because they're going to throw everything they can, and they meaning the fossil fuel industries and the nuclear industries, at the wind industry, because they know that their days are, if the wind industry really takes off, their days are numbered, because there's enough wind energy in the United States and surrounding the United States, especially in the oceans, to completely replace all the other sources of energy. We could actually do it without solar if we had to. Solar and wind are wonderful complements to each other, and so you really want both, and we should have both. But if we had to, we could power the whole country on nothing but wind. So, so I just wanted to clear that up because you're probably going to be seeing stories like that in the next few months, since these things usually sort of happen in a coordinated manner. And just remember, in Europe, they've shown that wind turbines help the fishing industry. They don't hurt it. Okay, on to our next story, an update on the Line 3 controversy in Minnesota. And as we reported last week, there were lots of protests in D.C., people taking it to President Biden, saying, you shouldn't have allowed this illegal pipeline to go through without any environmental impact statements the way Trump did. And of course, as far as we know, Biden is ignoring them, as is Secretary of State or Secretary of the Interior, Deborah Haaland. Those protests were actually, A, ignored by the mainstream media for the most part, and B, it turns out there were 655 arrests of people at those protests in Washington, D.C., which I bet you didn't hear about. To me, it seems like pretty important. If it's important enough for 655 people to face arrest and all the pain and all the personal problems that go along with getting arrested at a protest, and those 655 get added to the 900 that were arrested during the construction, the people that put themselves in the path of the pipeline and tried to stop the destruction of the wetlands and so forth. And so that's 1,555 people arrested trying to block Line 3. Enbridge ended up paying $2.4 million to the law enforcement, to the state troopers there, to pay them to beat people up and stuff. And Enbridge also has missed a deadline. They were supposed to have repaired and done a cleanup on aquifer that they punctured. They created a fracking liquid spill that contaminated a huge wetland area. They were supposed to have done that. They haven't done it. And this kind of reminds me back of the Nexus pipeline controversy here in Ohio, when the company that was putting that in had a huge spill and didn't clean it up. And the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, or the Ohio EPA, said, "Oh, we're going to fine you." And the pipeline company said, "No, you're not. We're not going to pay any fines. We're covered by the federal government, not the state government." And as far as I know, they haven't paid any fines. But so, ignoring laws and deadlines and things like that is pretty much standard operating procedures for pipeline companies like Enbridge. And the governor of Minnesota is now doing he has officially announced his re-election campaign. He's running for governor again, and running on the strength of helping out the fossil fuel industry, despite the fact that he had to literally run over Native American rights and nature in order to do it. And he has also announced that he's not going to have big public events this time around. He's not going to have, things where like lots of people from the community can come, and instead he's going to have just like small, private, invitation-only things. And of course, I believe the reason for that is that he knows that he's going to, wherever he would go in a public venue, he'd be faced by protesters basically complaining about the fact that he violated law and did everything he could to help speed up the construction of a pipeline, which is carrying the kind of tar sands that are literally killing the planet. So, so let's see what happens to Governor Walz. All right, on to our next story. And our final story is the fact that Russia has finally admitted that there is such a thing as global warming. Up till now, Vladimir Putin has pretty much been saying that the whole thing's a plot to undermine Russia, whose economy is heavily dependent on exporting fossil fuels. And finally, he said, there's a story in the New York Times that was published on the 21st. It was by Anton Troyanovsky. And he's starting to talk like it's real. He's saying they're going to be carbon neutral by 2060. But if you look closely at the plans, they don't really quite add up yet. But it's interesting that even a dictator has finally been forced to admit to the reality of global warming. Somebody who gets to define reality for all the underlings in his country finally has been forced through just reality of flooding and permafrost melting and cities getting burned to the ground and in Russia they've had the tundra has burned, which literally means the ground is burning, the earth is burning, with all the built up organic matter under there. All this has added up to finally admitting that there is such a thing as global warming and that even Russia has to do something about it. Unfortunately, the story kind of has an example that sort of sums up what's going on with that, and that is that there's an island in the Pacific that Russia has decided they're going to put up 16 big wind turbines, which is great, but they're going to use the energy from the wind turbines to run their coal mine that's on that island, which sucks. And also, Reuters has reported that Vladimir Putin has decided not to come to the Glasgow summit on global warming. And so, on the one hand, to admit it's real and to say, oh, we're going to finally do something about it. But then on the other hand, to skip the one big meeting where the whole world is going to hopefully finally, after all these decades of delay and debate, after the last couple years that we've had, finally actually come to some sort of a decision and action plan, that sends a mixed message, to say the very least. So, so the autocrats, as Biden likes to say, even the autocrats are having to face the reality of climate change. And really, climate change doesn't care. Global warming doesn't care if your country's being run by a dictatorship or a democracy. it it transcends our human ways of organizing ourselves. And so all of our countries, whether they are horrible dictatorships or wonderful democracies, we all have to do the same things. We all have to get off carbon, stop opening new mines, stop building new pipelines, stop creating the infrastructure of death, because that's what fossil fuel infrastructure is right now. There was just some global warming enhanced rain in India, hundreds of people dead, and we've had billions of dollars of damage in the past 10 years from global warming enhanced storms and sea level rises, and it couldn't be more clear. And so when you see somebody like Biden, who gives the wonderful speech in Scranton, Pennsylvania, saying we have to get off fossil fuels to save the future generations, it's for our children, that's what he says. But then what he does is he approves Line 3 and pushes it through the Native American reservations, despite incredible resistance, with over 1,000, over 1,500 people arrested. He's saying things better than Putin is, but he's not moving us away. He's still trying to play the all of the above. He's still trying to say, oh yeah, we'll build windmills and we'll put up solar farms and we'll build pipelines and we'll keep mining coal and we'll do this and we'll do that. And it doesn't work. We've got to go all the way non-carbon, all of us. And so thank you very much for any efforts you're making to help make the world a better place. And thank you so much for listening to For a Green Future. We couldn't do it. We wouldn't do it without you. So we'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!